Hey everyone, welcome back to a new video. I hope you had a great day. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. Thank you for subscribing to the channel and for hitting the like button. If you haven't already, why don't you make this the video that you subscribe to the channel? And please don't forget to hit the like button for the algorithm. It really helps out the channel and would mean a lot to me. The first story is called Lie About My Hours. I work in theatre doing front of house and customer service work. That means that I typically do a lot of odd hours, with evenings and weekends. At my former job, they only wanted to pay me hourly, despite asking for salary numerous times, and honestly, it would have benefited them more than me. On average, my weekdays would run from 2 to 10, as I had the admin work I had to do during the day, which I couldn't always do during shows and events. I tried to schedule things so I wouldn't go into overtime, but every once in a while it happened. Shows run long, people like to stay and chat. Rental events don't know their timings well and really mess up the time. It happens, just part of the job. So it would be pretty common for me to finish with 8.5 or 9-hour days. And since I was paid hourly, that meant overtime. Eventually, my boss and the executive director talked to me about why I so often went into overtime. And why did I come in early when I knew I'd be staying late. I outlined that unless I couldn't, I would schedule my days to try and have some leeway to avoid daily overtime. But it wasn't always possible and they should understand that. Especially my boss, as she had my position at one time before I started. While they did acknowledge that point, they didn't want to constantly pay for a little bit of overtime. Their solution was for me to adjust the hours on my timesheet on a day I worked over 8 hours and just take what would have been overtime and put it on a different day. In other words, abuse labor laws so they wouldn't have to pay me an extra $9 or so for the half hour of daily overtime. I was unimpressed, but I was already looking for a new job, so I decided to play ball. Because I knew I could still make my point with some malicious compliance. Thankfully, that first week there were events I knew would likely run long. And they didn't disappoint. I ended up having to spread 6.5 hours of work over 2 days. One of which I came in after 5, but I ended up putting on my schedule that I came in at 2. Still the same hours worked, just spread out to avoid the daily overtime. Well, of course, when timesheets were checked over by our accountant, it was noticed that there were 2 days I charged for being in the office when I wasn't. When she asked what the situation was, I explained that I did what was requested. I took the daily overtime hours and moved them to days I wasn't going into overtime. Thankfully, the accountant and I were pretty close, so she just rolled her eyes at the stupidity of it all and went to talk to my boss and the director about it. The cherry on top of it all? Because I still claimed the same amount of hours, I still went into weekly overtime, which ended up meaning I got more money, because the weekly hours all came in one lump rather than being spread out over the daily hours. Oddly enough, for the last couple of months I worked at that mess of a theatre, they didn't really harp on me about daily overtime anymore. The next story is called Hit It Once and Move On. When I was younger, I got a job doing pavements and other stonework. I started with 3 new guys, and the first week was pure hell. The owner did not teach us anything, and we had zero clues about what we were doing. But the one thing the owner did do was yell at us like 90% of the time. He would tell you to do something that you haven't done ever, and then yell at you for 5 minutes straight when you turned it wrong and the tires would dig themselves into the ground. Or he would just give you a concrete saw and yell at you when you couldn't start it instantly. After 4 days of 12-hour days with no overtime paid, they changed our worksite and we had to do some cobblestones to a big government project. No overtime because staying after 8 hours was voluntary, but he said if you don't stay, they won't extend your contract. I was super exhausted at this point and all 3 of us were close to quitting because of all the yelling and zero instructions on anything. The boss man and his second in command came to the site and showed us, just put these stones like this, hit them once so they are even and level and move on. I tried it but learned quickly that my eyes can't handle the height difference. So I used a line to see where they should be, hit 4 or 5 of them, then used a plank to see that they were on the same level and moved on. It looked nice, and using that plank took like 10 seconds of my time per 4 to 5 stones. The boss noticed me doing this and yelled like crazy that there is no time on checking where they are. We should just put the cobblestone to the concrete, hit once and move on. Then they left, so that's what we did. For 12 hours we did the fastest work ever. Every stone we got our hands on we threw into the ground, hit it once and moved on. The bed looked bad. It looked like a roller coaster. Some stones were higher than others. The lines were so crooked that you could not find a straight line even if you tried. Saturday came and the boss had gone to check on our work. He found me and he yelled so much and so loud that I had to tone down the volume on my phone as I was worried about losing my hearing. He told me if I did not come to fix it that day, there would be zero work on Monday. I just told him that's okay, good luck on finding some other guys to yell at and quit on the spot. End result, all 3 of us quit that day. The boss had to spend his whole Saturday fixing our mistakes. He also had to pay us for us sabotaging his worksite for 12 hours. I doubt he had fun looking for new workers. After we left, there were only him, his second in command and his father that was trying to retire. After I left, I found out he had a super poor track record of keeping his employees for more than 1 season. Nobody would tolerate him for more than that. The third story is called Put a Tree on the Paper. I studied elementary education in college and we were required to take a class on art and elementary aged students. This was not a field class where we would work with actual students, this was a lecture about child development and art. This included age milestones, how to engage them, developmentally appropriate activities, you get the idea. In one class, the professor was demonstrating giving instructions to our classroom and our role was to follow along as the students. She had us working on a piece of paper and whatever art supplies we desired, so long as we followed the directions. For context, most of us were using markers, colored pencils, etc. and drawing along. Steps started relatively simple and grew more complex as she progressed through the development milestones or something to that effect. So somewhere in there she tells us to put a tree on your paper. I started to draw a tree, but then it dawned on me. I just collected some leaves for my science course and they were still pressing in my textbook. As sneakily as I could, I slipped a leaf out of my backpack and glued it smack dab in the middle of the page. The professor was on the other side of the room and continued giving instructions while she meandered around, lecturing in between. My desk mates, many of whom were in the science class as well, saw what I was up to and almost gave it away with their stifled laughs. We held it together until the professor finally made her way to our table. We watched as the leaf caught her eye, and she froze as she processed what she was seeing. And she lost it. Full on, bent over, tears from her eyes laughing, much to my surprise. She had me show the class my work and her contagious laughter caught on while she slipped and gasped about never seeing someone put a literal tree on their paper. The last story is called Bad Management Decision. I live in a small country and I'm an engineer in a very niche field. Where I live, there are about 15 to 18 people in my field in the whole country. Also, unions are a good thing here and most companies are fine with unions. The employee benefits from this, but so does the employer, since the rules of the game are very clear. Clear for most people, as my employer was about to find out. My story goes like this, and it took place late in 2019 until late 2020. My team consisted of 3 people, and one on our team, our mentor, was ready to retire 2 years prior to this happening. But he stayed on because of codependence issues, I guess. We had 10 to 12 years of experience each. We were just younger and more inexperienced than our mentor, who had over 40 years of experience. I really envisioned us taking over the team soonish. The company is a large actor where I live, but things had not been going too great for the shareholders for some 6 months prior to all this happening. Knowing this, I decided that I'll not ask for a raise in my annual performance review to show I'm a team player and explicitly state this to my boss's boss, Mr. V. All is fine and well for 3 months. Then the bomb drops. One fine autumn day in 2019, I was called to a meeting with my boss, Mrs. G. Mrs. G told me that they didn't expect there to be enough work to go around for my team next year. So they wanted to cut me down to a part-time job, working only 80%. That would be about 4 days a week, starting 3 months hence. I immediately asked if this is also the case for my other co-worker and if our mentor was going to retire. Well, yes, but no. My co-worker would also be offered 80%. Our mentor was going to be working 60%. And I'm like, what? He really wants to retire, you know. Well, he is not yet, says Mrs. G, because of reasons and stuff. Okay, so I signed a new contract, but feel bad about it since I was really trying to be a team player. But I did not feel my employer was taking responsibility for us employees, but only thinking of the shareholders. I also get the feeling that they do not see me or my coworker taking over the team anytime soon, despite us not being novices in the field. I immediately start planning for the future. After this happens, I start asking around if other employees are also facing part-time employment due to no projects in 2020. As one does, you want to know how others are doing, right? Nobody else is getting part-timed, and everybody else is appalled. Just us three, we are singled out for some reason. Some of our colleagues even say that they have had stints of no work for months without any actions taken in this regard. There is now general displeasure in my team towards our employer. Since our mentor just wanted to retire and let us do the job, there would have not been any reason to have us younger engineers working part-time really. But no, because of reasons. And stuff. Okay, so what to do? I have a family and 2 kids, mortgages and a lot. And this will be a blow to the family income. So I start planning to do some work on the side. Since I am an engineer, I can do consulting, right? My employment contract says no. But if my employer cannot or will not offer me a full-time job, the union contracts say I can do what I want with the rest of my time. And my employer cannot interfere. I also have the right to refuse more work from my employer, because I may have other obligations. Me 1, employer 0. I open up my own company, buy a domain, make a web page, start calling, writing and letting people know I'm available for consulting. Of course, I checked with the union lawyers beforehand if it was okay, which it was, totally fine. They told me that since my employer laid me off and rehired me part-time, I could do what I wanted with the rest of my time. This would not have been the case if I had requested part-time employment. Great, so I go to work for myself then. Me too, employer 0. Almost immediately after our new contracts take effect, my employer starts noticing there is more than enough work to go around and asks me to work more hours. No, I say. Unfortunately, I have other obligations. I really didn't, I was just making a stand and forcing them to recognize their own mistake. Time passes. My savings account drains in about 3 months' time, but we managed to cut down on our expenses, so it's not rough seas, but still not smooth sailing by far. Income is a bit on the low side, although I managed to get some consulting done in my own time. I switch from sourdough bread to stale boring white bread. Go from good beer to Bud Light to no beer. What you have to do, you have to do. No more fine roasted coffee from the small shop on the corner. Only what sludge I can get at the supermarket and brew at home. But this is temporary, I tell myself. And then it happens. I get a big job and start moonlighting to get it done, working evenings and weekends. And this is when it hit the fan, because word got out. I get an angry phone call from Mrs. G's boss. Mr. V and we had a heated conversation over what I can and cannot do. The conversation was something like this, in short terms. Think of how this reflects on our company. That is not my concern here, Mr. V. I have bills to pay and mouths to feed. This is not what we had in mind. Hey, you laid me off, man. You should know the rules of the game. You cannot dictate what I do in my spare time. Perhaps you should have thought it through when you reduced my hours. You think I was happy to lose income and would not try to remedy my financial situation? You can work more hours for us then. I have other obligations now, can't let down my customers. He got very angry. You should consider your next steps carefully, young man. Mr. V, I shall do that. Thank you for calling. What then followed was a phone call from me to my union explaining the situation. Later that week, my employer got a phone call from the union lawyer who spoke to Mr. V and the HR department, telling them what they can and cannot do. And I just kept working for myself. Mr. V is now very unhappy, stops greeting me when we pass each other in the hallway. Me 3, employer 0. 2 months later, I hand in my resignation. 3 months after that, I'm gone. And to rub salt in the wounds, something remarkable happens. My co-worker, not our mentor mind you, asked if I would want to partner up and start a new company together. Yes, I say, for it was a great idea. The co-worker hands in his resignation a month after I handed mine in, and we started working in our own company full-time. People that depend on our service are very happy about us entering the market as independent consultants. Business takes off. Me/us 4. Employer 0. The aftermath. My former employer has had an opening for our jobs since August 2020. Our mentor told me last month that he has finally put down his foot and is retiring at the end of the year as he's turning 70 soon. They will thus have gone from 3 people in a very niche field to 0 in less than 2 years because of bad managerial decisions. It did not come as a surprise to me that there were no others available in the market. Since it's a niche field, I know almost every person personally, so I could have told them that everybody seemed happy with their current employer. Being a manager must suck. Alright, that's me now. And now it's your time to shine. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories and today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.